Why most people are born to be slaves. Nietzsche's truth. What if I told you that most people don't want freedom, not really? And that comfort, not liberty, is the human default. That the masses, not through force, but through their own quiet consent, choose slavery every single day. These aren't just provocative claims, they are the philosophical core of Friedrich Nietzsche's most unsettling idea that most people are born to be slaves. Not slaves in chains, not slaves under tyrants alone, but slaves to thought, to morality, to routine, to fear. And before you reject this as too harsh, too cynical, I want you to stop and ask yourself one thing. So, when was the last time you made a decision that felt truly free, a decision not shaped by fear, guilt, expectation, or imitation? If you can't remember, you're not alone. You're just human. And Nietzsche wasn't condemning us, he was exposing us. From the moment we're born, we are indoctrinated with invisible scripts. We're told what's good, what's bad, what's polite, what's shameful, what success looks like, what failure means. And most of us never question where these ideas came from. We just inherit them. We wear them like uniforms. We follow models of life that were built for mass control, not for individual greatness. But Nietzsche called this slave morality a moral system born not out of strength, but out of weakness. It values humility over pride, obedience over ambition, and safety over truth. It teaches us to be meek, to suppress our instincts, to worship suffering as virtue. And the reason it spreads so easily is because it flatters the powerless. It tells the weak that they are morally superior to the strong. It tells the fearful that their restraint is nobility. But what if it's not?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Nietzsche didn't believe humanity was doomed to servitude, but he did believe most people prefer it. Because freedom is terrifying. It demands responsibility. It forces you to think for yourself, to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to risk failure without guarantees. It strips away the comfort of blaming others. And that is too much for most. So instead, people choose the herd. They choose the safety of conformity. They outsource their thinking to the crowd. And they call it morality, or decency, or tradition. But it's not. It's fear dressed up as virtue. It's slavery sold as peace. Now, let's pause for a moment. This isn't just a critique of society, this is a mirror being held up to each of us. Because before we can point fingers, we have to look inward. Where in your own life have you chosen the easier path over the true one? Where have you silenced your voice to fit in? Where have you denied your instincts not because you were wrong, but because they didn't align with what was expected of you? We all do it, and Nietzsche's genius was not in blaming us, but in daring us to wake up, to stop pretending we are free when we are not, and to stop worshipping weakness as if it was sainthood. He believed there were two kinds of people, the slave and the master, not in the historical sense, but in the psychological sense. The slave follows the rules, obeys the crowd, fears judgment, and clings to comfort. The master creates values, stands alone, embraces suffering, and lives by an inner law. The master is not cruel, but he is dangerous, because he refuses to be tamed, and that's why the world resists him. Society needs obedience to function. It needs predictability, and that's why the master is always seen as a threat. He reminds the herd that they are not free, and they hate him for it. But here's the twist. The master is not born, he is forged. He is created through struggle, through rejection, through inner war. And that means that anyone can become one if they're willing to face the truth. And here's the truth: most of what you believe about yourself is not yours. Your fears, your limits, your sense of what is possible, they were planted in you by parents, teachers, media, culture. You inherited them. You didn't choose them. And so the first step toward freedom, real freedom, is to begin questioning everything. Not in rebellion, but in inquiry. Why do I believe what I believe? Where did this idea come from? Does it serve me or cage me? The people who are born to be slaves are not born that way biologically. They are born into systems that teach them to stay small. And then they give their consent. That's what makes it so dangerous. Because there are no chains, just habits, just comfort, just invisible lines that people never cross, not because they can't, but because they've forgotten that they can. So the question becomes, are you living your own life? Or are you performing a role that was handed to you? Most people never ask. Most people never want to. Because asking opens a door that cannot be closed. But if you're still watching this, maybe, just maybe, you're one of the few who's ready to cross the threshold, to take off the mask, to step into the unknown. Because on the other side of that door is not chaos, it's power. The machinery of control, how society manufactures slaves and calls it success. Look around you. Everywhere you turn, there are systems, elegant, efficient, and invisible, designed not to set you free, but to domesticate you. From the schools that grade you on obedience, to the jobs that pay you just enough to keep you from quitting, society has built a machine. And this machine doesn't need chains or whips. It runs on reward and punishment, praise and shame. It doesn't enslave your body, it enslaves your will. And the most terrifying part is that it convinces you that this is freedom. That to sit still in a cubicle, to follow orders, to live for weekends and die in increments, this is what it means to be a responsible adult. But Nietzsche saw through this illusion. He said, in individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. He meant that the madness of the crowd is normalized by repetition, and that the greatest danger to the human spirit is not chaos, but conformity. Let's make this brutally clear. You are trained systematically to believe that success means climbing someone else's ladder, that intelligence means memorizing someone else's facts, that goodness means following someone else's rules. And when you do this well, when you conform, when you obey, when you color inside the lines, you are rewarded. You are praised. You are called talented, promising, moral. But if you question the rules, if you challenge the assumptions, if you say, I will not be another cog in this machine, then suddenly you're a threat, you're difficult, you're selfish, you're dangerous. Why? Because you've seen the truth that the emperor has no clothes, and that most people are clapping because they're too afraid to say otherwise. Think about school. From a young age, you are taught not to think, but to recall, not to question, but to comply. You sit in rows. You raise your hand to speak. You are rewarded for being quiet, for being agreeable, for regurgitating what the textbook says is true. But when was the last time true genius came from obedience? When has any real transformation in art, science, philosophy come from someone who followed the rules? It hasn't, and it never will, because transformation requires deviation. It requires rebellion. It requires someone who says, this system is not enough for me. But And that kind of person, the free spirit, the Übermensch Nietzsche spoke of, cannot be manufactured. They must be forged in fire. Now let's talk about work. The modern workplace is a marvel of quiet coercion. You are given a title, a salary, a benefits package. You're told you're lucky to be there. And in return, you give away your time, your energy, your creativity, often for something you don't even believe in. You trade your hours for a paycheck, and then you use that paycheck to buy things that numb the pain of that transaction. And the genius of the system is that it calls this normal. But ask yourself, would you do your job if you weren't paid? Would you still show up if the title meant nothing? If the answer is no, then you are not free, you are renting your life to someone else. And we haven't even touched religion, media, culture, all of which operate on the same principle: shape the mind and you control the man. A religion, at its worst, tells you that suffering is noble, that desire is sin, that questioning is blasphemy. Media tells you what to fear, what to buy, what to dream. Culture tells you who to be, how to act, what to wear, when to speak. And all of it is noise. Noise meant to drown out the one voice that could set you free, your own. So how does this happen? How do billions of people sleepwalk through life, convinced they are awake? Nietzsche would say it is because they are afraid of their own power. Because freedom, real freedom, requires self-overcoming. It requires that you kill your idols, burn your maps, and walk into the wilderness of your own mind. And most people, when faced with that choice, will crawl back into the cage. They will choose the comfort of chains over the terror of possibility. They will say, "Better the devil I know," and call it wisdom. But it's not wisdom, it's fear. And fear, when ritualized, becomes culture. So here's the real question. What if success, as it's been defined for you, is the very thing keeping you enslaved? What if the house, the job, the reputation, the applause, what if all of it is a golden leash? Would you have the courage to let it go? To walk away? To start over on your own terms, not because it's easy, but because it's yours? Nietzsche believed that only a few would ever make that choice. That most are born with the potential for greatness, but taught to fear it. That they will spend their lives polishing their cages, calling themselves free, worshipping mediocrity because true excellence demands too much. But he also believed that in every era, a few would rise. A few would wake up. A few would look at the machinery of control, and instead of submitting, they would smile not with arrogance, but with clarity. Because they know the machine only works if you keep feeding it. The moment you stop, the moment you say, "I will create my own values, I will write my own script, I will walk alone if I must," is the moment you become untouchable. Not because the world will applaud you, but because it no longer has power over you. That is the beginning of true power. That is the beginning of real freedom. The birth of the Ubermensch, what it really takes to escape the herd, to escape the herd, to escape the herd, is not to run away from society, but to transcend it. Not to rebel for rebellion's sake, but to rise above the values that keep humanity small, fearful, and obedient. Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch, the overman, the one who overcomes, is not a fantasy, not a mythic figure from some distant future. It's a possibility buried inside each of us. But to awaken that possibility, to become what Nietzsche called a creator of values, demands a death. The death of the old self. The self that obeys. And the self that conforms. The self that seeks approval. Because the birth of the Übermensch does not begin with power. It begins with destruction, the destruction of everything inside you that was never truly yours. How many of your beliefs did you choose? How many of your fears are truly rational? How much of your personality is just armor you developed to survive a world that punishes authenticity? These are not casual questions, they are sacred. Because until you answer them with brutal honesty, you are not living, you are performing. Nietzsche believed that most people were so deeply embedded in the morality of the herd that they had forgotten what it meant to think independently. They mistake comfort for peace, submission for virtue, and routine for meaning. And so, they live in cycles. They wake, they work, they consume, they sleep. And through it all, they never ask, is this all there is? The Ubermensch begins where that question begins. He does not ask for permission. He does not ask, what should I do? He asks, what do I will? And that will is not selfish, it is sovereign. It is not the will to dominate others, but to dominate oneself. To take the raw material of life, pain, joy, suffering, instinct, failure, desire, and forge it into something beautiful, original, unrepeatable. The Ubermensch is not a tyrant. He is not a narcissist. He is a creator, a sculptor of his own soul. He does not inherit values. He invents them. But this process is agonizing, because to become the Ubermensch is to walk through fire and to keep walking. It is to lose the approval of the world, to be misunderstood, mocked, even hated. It is to stand naked in front of the abyss and say, I will not look away. It is to carry the weight of your own existence without outsourcing it to gods, governments, or gurus. It is to take full responsibility for your life and full responsibility for your power. And most people, when faced with that kind of responsibility, will retreat. They will say, it's too much, and they will run back to the herd, back to the comfort of rules, rituals, and rewards. But if you can endure it, if you can stand in that fire long enough, something extraordinary happens. You start to see clearly. You start to feel your own will rise from the ashes. Not a will that mimics the crowd, but a will that creates, that speaks, that acts, that moves through the world not like a sheep, but like a storm. And this is when you begin to understand what Nietzsche meant by becoming who you are. Because most people die as strangers to themselves. But the Ubermensch lives as an original. So, let me ask you directly, what have you sacrificed for comfort? What part of you have you silenced in exchange for belonging? What dream did you bury just to be accepted? And more importantly, are you brave enough to reclaim it, even if it means walking alone? Because that is the price of freedom. Not applause, not safety, but solitude. And in that solitude, you find your power. You find your voice. And for the first time, you hear it clearly. The birth of the Ubermensch is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who are done pretending, who are tired of sleepwalking, who are ready to die to the false self so they can be reborn as something real, not perfect, not pure, but whole. And in that wholeness lies a strength that no system can control, but no herd can seduce, no fear can shrink. The final rebellion, why becoming free will cost you everything, and why it's worth it. Freedom, real freedom, is not given, it is taken. And the cost is staggering. To become truly free, to reject the values of the herd, to rise above the machinery of control, you must be willing to lose almost everything, your comfort, your certainty, For your identity, your tribe. This is the final rebellion. And it is not glamorous. It doesn't look like a cinematic revolution. It looks like silence, isolation, doubt. It looks like stepping into a world without maps, without guarantees, and still choosing to walk forward. But this is the price of becoming fully alive. What Nietzsche understood is that most people don't want to be free. They want to feel free while remaining protected by the rules of the herd. They want freedom without risk, individuality without isolation, truth without discomfort. But these things cannot be separated. To be free is to be responsible for your own values, your own morality, your own meaning. And once you step outside the herd, you can't blame anyone else. There is no one left to follow, no ideology to hide behind, no tradition to lean on, just you, and that is terrifying. But it's also sacred, because in that terrifying space, that existential void, you find something more powerful than any system could offer you: authenticity. You find your true self, raw and unfiltered, unshaped by conditioning. And in that discovery, you realize that the very things you feared losing, your status, your approval, your safety, were never yours to begin with. They were borrowed identities, inherited roles, illusions. And when you let them go, you don't become less, you become real. So what does this final rebellion look like in practice? It looks like questioning everything you were taught to believe. It looks like walking away from a career that deadens your soul. It looks like saying no to relationships that require you to shrink. It looks like disappointing people who wanted you to stay small. It looks like choosing truth over comfort and meaning over approval. It's not about becoming a lone wolf or an outcast for ego's sake. It's about reclaiming your birthright to live your life, not the one designed for you. And yes, it will hurt. You will grieve. You will doubt. You will long for the comfort of certainty. But what you gain in return is worth more than anything you leave behind. You gain sovereignty. You gain clarity. You gain a kind of peace that cannot be taken from you, because it wasn't built on anyone else's rules. You become, as Nietzsche envisioned, a creator of values, someone who doesn't just live by inherited truths, but invents new ones. Not for everyone, not to convert the herd, but to live in alignment with your own deepest will. And here's the paradox: once you become free, once you shed the chains of the herd, you don't become cold or cruel, you become compassionate. Not in the shallow, performative way the herd demands, but in a deeper way. Because you begin to see how much people suffer under the weight of the roles they never chose. You see how fear runs their lives, and instead of judging them, you feel for them. You love them not because they approve of you, but because you understand them. You were once there too. But you're not there anymore. You stepped out. You paid the price. And now you carry something with you that the world desperately needs: not a doctrine, not a belief system, but an example. A living example of what it looks like to be free, to be whole, to be fully human. And yes, the world may still call you dangerous. It may still try to pull you back in. But once you've tasted freedom, there is no return. The herd will never satisfy you again. So I leave you with this: what are you still clinging to that is keeping you enslaved? And what would happen not if you let it go someday, but if you let it go now? Because the door is open. The path is lonely. The price is high. But on the other side of that final rebellion is the only thing worth living for: a life that is yours. And that changes everything.